Hey guys, welcome to my yard. If you've seen the Earth Day video that I made last year, then you've been here before and welcome back. If this is your first trip, I'm glad to have you here. Today we're going to talk about habitats. So what is a habitat? A habitat is a place where a living organism lives. It's where it makes its home. So what is an organism? Well, an organism is anything that's alive. So the trees that you see behind me, these are organisms. I don't know if you can hear them. Those are cicadas. Those are an organism too. They're an insect. I also have lots of animals in my yard, which are organisms as well. So an organism is any living thing, and the habitat is the place where an organism makes its home. One of the organisms whose habitat is in my yard is the chipmunk. Chipmunks belong to the same family of animals as squirrels, but they're smaller and their habits are really very different. So chipmunks actually like to burrow into the ground. And here, let's see if we can get up on it, is one of the burrows for my chipmunks. See that hole? That goes deep underneath my driveway. There's another one over here that you can see more easily. I don't know if you can see those holes in the ground. There used to just be one here. I think that this was one of their tunnels and it's kind of started collapsing a little bit. So why do chipmunks like to make their habitat in my yard? Well, if you can see these, those are little acorns because I am standing underneath an oak tree. This is an oak tree. And this oak tree makes lots of little acorns in the fall. The ground is covered in these little acorns, and the chipmunks love them, and they last a long time, so this will keep the chipmunks fed through the winter. My yard is the habitat for a lot of birds as well, and the reason for that is I grow a lot of flowers, and flowers produce something that birds really need. Those are seeds. If you look at these black-eyed Susans, the part that's the black eye is actually a head of seeds. Marigolds are a type of flower, and marigolds really help a lot of creatures that live in my yard because the marigold, once the flower dies back, the bud that's left behind is actually a housing for the seeds. These are actually marigold seeds. And the flower will finish drying out, and then these seeds will get picked up by birds and other organisms and scattered throughout the yard, and they will grow more marigolds.
Plants and animals aren't the only organisms that make my backyard their habitat.
There's another group of organisms that really love living under this big shady oak tree, especially when it's been raining a lot. And that type of organism is actually what we call a decomposer. They like to live on all of this dead leaf litter that my oak tree produces in the fall. So if we look closely on the ground, especially where you see that dead twig? There's a dead twig right here, and all these dead leaves. This is a fungus, and that's a whole nother kingdom of organisms, and they really like to live where it's moist and shady and cool, and there's dead things for them to feed on. With all this wet weather and all this nice dead leaf matter for fungi to feed on, I have actually quite a lot of really big ones growing in my yard right now. Take a look at these guys. They're decomposers. They live off of other things that have already died. The trunks of the trees in my yard make a really nice habitat for a really interesting organism. This is called a lichen. And lichens are super interesting because they're a combination of fungi. You can see they kind of look a little bit like those mushrooms.
And a plant-like protist.
So they're what we call a symbiotic relationship where
the plant-like protist
and the fungi live together. And so when it's sunny, the plant part of the lichen can make food. But when it's not sunny, when it's cool and wet and dark, the fungi part lives off of the bark that's a little bit dead at the surface here on this tree. My backyard actually offers a really great habitat for an animal that we like to see. It's a rabbit. And we have a bunch of rabbits that live in my yard, and you can see why. Rabbits really like the clover and some of these sweet-tasting weeds, really, that grow in my yard. They also like to have places to hide from other animals that like to eat rabbits. So we have these grapevines that actually produce a really tasty grape called a muscadine. But as you can see, there's lots of great places for rabbits to hide under here.
Organisms need water in their habitat to live, so behind these grapevines, there's a little creek back there.
We also have some really tall trees with some nice open branches. And if you've learned about the food web and food chain, you know that if you've got small creatures, you're going to get the bigger creatures that eat small creatures. And our trees are the habitat for a lot of hawks. Plants are organisms too, and they have specific things that they need in their habitat as well. This plant is called a southern magnolia, and it only grows in the south. And when we get in for a closer look, you'll see why.
Magnolias are a type of evergreen.
It stays green all year long. It doesn't lose its leaves in the fall like other trees do. But part of that is why it can't live in the north. These big, thick leaves that the tree is covered in would catch snow really well. So if this tree tried to grow where there was a lot of snow, the snow would weigh down these branches and break them. So remember, an organism is a living thing, and the habitat is its home. For a habitat to be good for an animal, it needs to provide food, water, and shelter. And I've tried to show you some of the ways that my backyard habitat provides those things for the organisms that live here. I'm so glad you were able to stop by. I hope you can come again. Thanks.